the chicken plow. You tell me what else is on the menu, please, sir, for today.
This is the third act made in this video. It was the very first tube amp that I ever attempted building, and it shows. Let's go over some of the details. On the front we have the gain, volume, nothing, mixer, bass, and the treble. And that's the nothing. Both of those were supposed to be overdrive controls because, yeah, tube amps definitely have overdrive switches. Around the back, we got a headphones / external speaker jack and an auxiliary input jack. That's what the mixer does. It mixes that with the input on the front. We got the two tubes, which are a 12AX7 and a 12AU7. Two transformers, both of which came out of air conditioning units. The cabinet's in rough shape, you know, it's kind of coming apart and stuff. And we made a point not to fix any of that in the video about this amp. And another thing that I didn't show in the video about this amp is the fuse. This is the only amp I've ever made with a fuse. But there's our fuse. It's a 1,000,000 amp fuse. Perfect. So let's pull the chassis out, see what's going on. Here's the inside of the chassis. It's pretty neat and clean in here, I guess, but there's a lot wrong. For one thing, this is our audio output transformer, a series parallel array of power transformers, which don't even come close to having the right impedance for a 12AU7. And they have solid cores and make terrible output transformers. Over here we got the mixing stuff. That's what we're using to mix the two audio sources, which, I mean, it works, but it also has an effect on the tone of both channels, and it's not really a predictable effect. We've got these little blue ceramic capacitors in here, which make really crappy tone capacitors. They're just terrible for anywhere that a sound signal passes through them. That's the rectifier and filter and stuff, and it just has one B+, and it powers 3 of the triodes, except for the 4th one is powered off of another one that's here. We'll look at the schematic later. I think it would be nice to make this amp worth a shit. I know that we said we did that last time, and to be fair, we did improve it. But that's only because the second act was such a piece of crap that this low quality of a tube amp is actually an improvement. Well, it's not very good. It's arguably one of the worst tube amps ever built. And it's a common theme for the first act. The first act was a really mediocre, unimpressive little transistorized guitar amp, and then the second act was a really, really unimpressive, mediocre rebuild of said guitar amp, and now the third act is a really unimpressive, mediocre vacuum tube version of it. There is a pattern here. So we're going to try and break that pattern by making it worth a shit. Maybe that's going to work. We'll see. This is the power supply schematic for the third act. And this is the amplifier schematic, which for some reason turned purple when I printed out a screenshot of it. But anyway, here it is. We're going to go over some things. Number one, 47 nanofarad capacitor here. And 1 nanofarad there. I put those on there because the amp squealed, and they stopped it from squealing. They also stopped it from reproducing treble. And I made this obnoxious remark at the end of the video. Speaking of squealing, this amp is intentionally capable of oscillating on purpose because that's the music style that we like. We made a point to make sure it could squeal once it was completed. Which turned out not to be true. This amp has never squealed while it's in this thing. We thought we were going to be able to manipulate the squealing. No. So what else we got going on here? Well, this is another filter here that goes to the B+2, which only powers the first triode. Over here we got what amounts to a bright cap. And then what's this? Overdrive potentiometer. That's a crock of shit. That doesn't work at all. It makes basically no difference. Then we come on down here and we got the low impedance input, where it's essentially just injecting a signal with a ton of capacitor coupling into the middle of this line here. And I mean, it works, but not really properly. We'll come on over here into the V1A, which seems like that should be V1A, but it's V2A. What's up with that? Got a 100K resistor up here. 100 ohms. 100 ohm. Nothing. What's up with that, man? We got a 100K plate drop on the second triode. I mean, that kind of makes sense. Our bass and treble controls here, I suppose they're not completely senseless. But what's up with this overdrive switch? All it does is bypass a 100K resistor that's in series with the signal. Yeah, it's as ineffective as it looks like it would be. It basically does nothing. But of course we say this crap. It adds like 1% or less to the actual loudness of the amp. But it noticeably changes the sound of the guitar when everything is turned up all the way. What do you want from me? Okay, this is the first one. We were up on a big high horse. So, come on into the third triode. 47K plate drop resistor. That's weird. So then, the output tube is pretty normal. Nothing really special going on there, except, what the fuck is going on here? Yeah, it's that series parallel array of transformers. There's basically everything wrong with this, and you know, the power supply. We get our line voltage, it steps it down to 26 volts. It's a weird voltage to use for your intermediate voltage on a amp with 12 volt tubes, but you see what we did, we got them in series. Bridge rectifier, and this little filter setup over here, which just 1B plus. That's it. You know, this didn't have a screen supply, but there is this right here. Technically that belongs over here if you ask me. This note up here, no ground causes oscillation, wrong ground causes hum. Heaters on this voltage do that, heaters on that voltage do this. You can pretty much ignore that. Like here where it says line level amplifier power supply. Line level. What the hell is that supposed to mean? And why the fuck did it turn purple when I printed it out? Well, anyway, that's the schematics, and here's the layout diagram if you want to scrutinize it. That's what's going on in there. I think it's fair to say there's more wrong than right in this amp. So the most appropriate course of action is to just gut everything out and start over. And since we waste 8 minutes on that explanation, all the impatient people who can't be bothered won't get to see it. So here we go. It's all empty. There's nothing in it. There's less in it than there was last time if you don't count the tube sockets. So now we have a fresh starting point. This is the schematic to a Fender Harvard 5F10 from 1956. It uses a 6AT6, a 12AX7, two 6V6s, and a 5Y3. We're not going to make this amp. But we're going to loosely base the circuit that we use on this schematic. Rather than making an amp without a gain control and using a notoriously microphonic 6AT6 tube, I've come up with this schematic. It's very similar, but there are some notable differences. First of all, we ditched the 5Y3 and it's now using a regular old diode rectification. It has a little bit different negative bias supply because it doesn't have a bias winding. Instead of the 6AT6, we're going to use a 12AX7 for the preamp tube, which gives us an extra triode, and that means we can have a gain control. We're going to use a Bassman tone stack, and we're going to use two 6P1Ps instead of two 6V6s. Here's all the components. For the power supply transformer, I'll be using this transformer out of a MR10 or MR33 monitor radio. It's the same transformer in both radios. It'll run about 250 volts B+, and it has a 6.3 volt filament supply. And for the output, I have this universal output transformer that conveniently has its part number written on it. I could map it the hard way, but we don't actually have to do that. I was able to find the data sheet, or whatever you call this, instruction sheet for it. It has all the numbers that you need. Looks pretty complicated. So basically what it is, mate, I want 10,000 ohms plate to plate, so we come down here and we find the closest thing to 4 ohms and the closest thing to 8 ohms. I've got them circled there. So we go over here to the column under 3823, 8 watt, and it says here for the 4 ohms, I'm going to need to go from pins 2 to 5. And for the 8 ohm, I want from pin 5 and 6. So based on that, I can hook up the common to the 5 here, and then I can use the 2 and 6 down here for my 2 outputs for the 2 impedances that I plan to have available. This transformer was in the MR10 radio that I turned into this amplifier, and I thought they had hooked it up wrong because it's a double-ended transformer, but it says here that you actually can use it as single-ended. I guess you can use this for single-ended operation after all. With that figured out and the meditation music set up, now we can set up the camera and do a time lapse to an offensive song and put this thing together.
Alright, you infidels, when you go to cheat on your spouses tonight at Motel No-Tell, just remember what's on those scummy fucking comforters that have never been washed. There's some shit, there's some piss, and some vagina juice, and some cum. They're scummy, and who knows if they've ever been washed. $50 a month to lay in someone else's filth. Anyways, it's called Motel BedSheets. Oh yeah, the funny blue light we see, the unsightly sight staring back at you and at me. The stain remains of poop, baby. Motel BedSheets. There's a little poo, there's a little you, where I'm gonna fuck you. Motel BedSheets. There's some stains of past fucking remains, with genitals green. Motel BedSheets. Under the funny blue light we see, the unsightly sight staring back at you and at me. The stain remains of poop, baby. Motel BedSheets. Hey, you sexy crack bitch. You wanna go back to my scummy motel with me? Give me some HIV, baby. Let me lick your bloody wound. Oh yeah, I love it. Alright now, you filthy motherfucking infidels, when you go cheat tonight on your insignificant other at the Motel No-Tell, just remember those comforters never been washed. They fucking suck. Motel BedSheets. Under the funny blue light we see, the unsightly sight staring back at you and at me. The stain remains of poop in Motel BedSheets. Come here, you sexy crack bitch. Come to my scummy fucking motel.
about it? This is how it turned out looking. Not bad. It's all modular. You know, we boasted about how modular it was in the third act. I think it's more modular now. We got the preamp section, the recovery / phase inverter section, the output section, and the power section. And over here we have the tone control section. I've put back the silver knobs on the volume and gain controls, but not on the tone controls because I don't have them. So we're going to use these black ones. It has an overdrive switch, sort of. It's the tone bypass, and it makes the amp a lot louder and therefore increases distortion. So it's kind of like an overdrive switch. And I covered up those pointless holes with some decorative screws just to try to make it look better. I also cleaned the dirt off of the faceplate that we made a point not to clean off last time, but we didn't do a perfect job. Can't do a perfect job, man. What do you want from us here? What do you think about this little metal back plate thing on the impedance selector switch? That's pretty sick, huh? That's the 8 ohm position and that's the 4 ohm position. I guess we should consider labeling it. So here's our Russian output tubes and our American input tubes. And man, these bad boys are pretty sensitive. This thing has hella gain. Way more than I thought it was going to have. It probably didn't even need the extra triode, but guess what? Gain control. Here's our bias information. The negative bias is set at negative 10.8 volts, and we got 28 and 30 milliamps in the tubes for a plate dissipation of 58 and 59%. And it sounds pretty decent. Now I think we should do something about this shitty cabinet. Now it's naked. We get to admire the craftsmanship. This thing sheds sawdust if you even look at it too hard. Don't look at this case sideways too hard, man. It's gonna just snap. These joints, they're just kind of glued together, you know, butted together and glued. The speaker baffle is pretty much its only structural integrity. So I need to remove these little rails here, at least part of them, because they make it impossible to install the chassis. And I don't have any intentions of having a board up here, so they wouldn't serve a purpose anyway. Now that's taken care of. I went and I sanded it down to remove all the old glue residue. So hopefully the new Tolex will stick to it. The paint will stick to it and stuff. We're missing something here. There we go. So I've repainted the speaker baffle on both sides, and I covered up the little portholes with some random pieces of Luan, and I painted the inside of the box black. And I took extra special care not to get any overspray on the cabinet because, you know, it makes such a huge difference. Look at this thing wobble, dude. That's ridiculous. If I'm really lucky, I'll be able to put this thing all the way back together without just causing it to disintegrate. Now we got a nice new grill cloth on there, neatly stapled in place with no blemishes, so that part's taken care of. I'm going to wrap the box with one single piece of that same blue snakeskin Tolex that I used on the Middleby Marshall mini tube amp. Then I'm going to repaint all the little chrome pieces flat black, including the heads of all the screws. So that looks pretty cool. Now that's taken care of. We need to address the design flaw. This amp has a squeal and a blocking distortion issue, and it's caused by the phase inverter. Here on the original Harvard schematic from 1956, you can see the phase inverter here, and it does not have a grid stopper. So of course our phase inverter does not have a grid stopper because we didn't modify that section of the schematic. Well, the Princeton and Deluxe from this same era have the same phase inverter, and they have the same problem. They're prone to blocking distortion if you crank the gain. It wasn't much of an issue with the little 6AT6, but now we have 12AX7. Gain is so high, it's overdriving the phase inverter into cutoff. So there's a well-known solution to this problem. It involves adding a grid stop right here of 470K. Now buried in here under these filament wires, we got this little coupling cap. That's this cap right here. And we got this little 1 meg resistor right here. That's this 1 meg. And right here, that's that pin that they're both soldered to. It's supposed to be a grid stopper there. We didn't really make any provisions for adding a grid stop there, but it looks like we're gonna need to, so we'll just do this. That works. It's 430 ohms. Close enough. That should work. Well, it got rid of the squeal. Pretty much. And the humming is from the lights because there's no shielding, I think. Now with the guitar hooked up to it, it doesn't have that awful hum anymore. See what I'm saying? I'll mute this thing with my knee. The gain is ridiculous. Fucking, I need 3 hands. So. As you can see, the amp has enough gain, and the overdrive control actually has an effect
somewhat similar to strawberry.
So it would seem that everything works just fine, and we still have a little tiny bit of squealing, so now we can leave it that way and claim that this amp is intentionally capable of oscillating and actually be telling the truth this time. The bass control is a linear pot, which means that you basically have this much of the range of motion that's effective, and the rest of this is of negligible effect. And I'm going to leave it that way because I just don't have a logarithmic pot to replace it with right now and don't want to bother. The bias resistor over here is 270K. It was a question mark on the schematic, and now it's not. It gives us about 25 volts across the bias pot, which doesn't burn up the pot. I stuck these pieces of masking tape here, that way you can tell where the controls are set, because it kind of, you can't tell without the masking tape there. Now we can do the audio demonstration, but first, a little clip of what it sounded like before. Now that we established a baseline. And that's the fourth act. The fourth rebuild of a first act practice amp, if you include the first version of the second act, which has yet to be documented. She sounds pretty good. I'm quite happy with the fact that it has so much preamp distortion when you crank the gain. You can actually have distortion at a low volume with this amp. I give it a 47 out of 10. You can hook up an external speaker to the output jack and make it into a head. You can store your cords down here in the bottom. It's got Russian output tubes. What more can you ask for? Look at how the black and the blue snake skin color scheme turned out. That's way nicer than that shitty looking black fake leather and chrome that was rusty and dirty and falling apart. Got the fully custom black knobs over here that we can act like is intentional. We got the fully custom ability to squeal because the self-grounding input jack doesn't actually self-ground because of oxidized contacts that we haven't fixed because we don't really care. An overdrive switch that actually kind of works like an overdrive switch. Man, it just doesn't get any better than this. Now be sure and go